Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Glad to have with us on this Wednesday, Alfred State history professor, Dr. Nick Waddy. Dr. Waddy, thanks for joining us.
It's always an honor, Brian. Thanks.
Well, since we last spoke, Dr. Waddy, the latest in the Kavanaugh nomination situation is this. A second accuser, Deborah Ramirez, who went to Yale with Brett Kavanaugh, says that Kavanaugh, basically what she's saying is that he flashed her, let's say, at a party at Yale. Kavanaugh's freshman roommate at Yale, and this was yesterday, James Roach said that Kavanaugh got aggressive when drunk. James Roach says he knows both Deborah Ramirez and Brett Kavanaugh. They were roommates freshman year again, and Roach says he believes Ramirez. The first accuser, Professor Christine Ford, is supposed to appear in the Senate tomorrow for that hearing, though Ford does keep coming up with reasons that could stall the appearance. What do you make of it all?
Wow, I mean, it makes your head spin, doesn't it? I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And the crazy thing is, a week or so ago, Kavanaugh was cruising to confirmation, and all of a sudden, these accusations come out of the woodwork. It's extraordinary. But I read the New Yorker piece about Ramirez, and it's interesting. I can see why a lot of people have problems with it in terms of the quality of the journalism, but I guess to their credit, they were honest about some of the flaws in the story. And Ramirez had to hash it over with her lawyers for several days before she decided what she believed happened. And I think at this point, I would agree with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell that this is a pile-on, this is a smear campaign, and this is a desperate attempt to derail Brett Kavanaugh and prevent him from joining the Supreme Court.
You didn't seem as certain last week, Dr. Waddy. What changed your mind?
Well, what I'm not comfortable doing is, as I said before, speculating on why any one person makes an accusation. That doesn't seem to me to be very productive. But when there is a pile-on, when all these things come at once, there's clearly an effort by the Democrats to exploit the situation, and they've learned from the last few months that you can't necessarily destroy someone with one allegation, but you can destroy them with a cascade of allegations, and that's what they've produced. The only thing that surprised me about the initial Christine Ford allegation was that there was only one accuser, because what we've often seen, and it's a pattern we're getting used to now, is that one person makes a charge and then many more come, as I said, out of the woodwork. And the stakes are very high here, so it is entirely plausible that some or all of these allegations are, as Brett Kavanaugh says, entirely contrived. I don't know that for a fact. The only thing I know about all of these parties is that I wasn't invited to them. I wasn't there, so I don't know what went on. But there's no doubt that all this is being politicized. And you have to ask the question: why did we go through the entire process of hearings without the Democrats raising any of this? And why is it necessary to raise these charges only at the 11th hour when it looks like Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed? And the answer is obvious.
So what you're saying there is the Democrats held off on making all of these allegations into his character in his high school and college years because it was a last-ditch effort. Do you think they know that these sorts of allegations are going to make them unpopular with a certain segment of the population, i.e. all conservatives and maybe even some middle-of-the-road people?
Yeah, I see this, what's going on right now, as sort of the political equivalent of a Hail Mary. I think the Democrats were hoping that they could block Kavanaugh by distorting his record and making people believe that he was a right-wing extremist, and maybe peeling off someone like Susan Collins on the abortion issue and defeating him in a more conventional way, maybe borking him essentially. And it became fairly obvious as the hearings were winding down that wasn't going to work, and all they had left was these sexual allegations. They've worked beautifully on many people in the entertainment industry and elsewhere, and I think think this is or was a last-ditch effort to derail Kavanaugh. Now, that doesn't mean that all these people who say they believe Christine Ford are lying. They may indeed believe her. I think people's ability to believe what they need to believe is infinite in my experience. If it's convenient for Democrats and liberals to believe Christine Ford and to hate Brett Kavanaugh, that's exactly what they're going to do. So I don't necessarily think they're insincere, but it's certainly opportunistic, and you can see right through it.
Abortion, of course, is the big issue here, the underlying issue as to the biggest court issue that opponents of Brett Kavanaugh or Trump would be fearful of Kavanaugh being influential on the abortion issue. Conservatives in the media keep reminding the public that these sorts of accusations against Kavanaugh were made with more evidence. They argue against Bill Clinton over the years, Keith Ellison, the congressman from Minnesota, who's way up there in the DNC, and many others. The conservatives have constantly been reminding us about them. What do you think that this does as far as the political discourse goes in influencing the middle of the road voters?
Well, I mean, it's ugly, that's for sure. The Kavanaugh hearings were already ugly before we even got to the stage of people leveling these sexual allegations. So, the whole thing is going to turn off many voters. You would think it might depress turnout. I can't imagine anyone in the center being very impressed by either side under these circumstances, but I think we're probably headed towards a high turnout election. It seems to be that both parties are getting really good at motivating their base, and you can tell that's what the Democrats are all about. The base wants them the Democratic politicians to stop at nothing and to get down and dirty in fighting Republicans and fighting President Trump, and increasingly that's what they're doing. So I think we're going to see a lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans, a lot of true believers turning out in November, and you're going to see a lot of Americans, even more than in the past, just totally disgusted by the process and without any respect for our government and our institutions, and that's a very sad position for the country to be in, but that's where we are.
I've heard different people say off the air that this is the kind of thing that will prevent a lot of good people from wanting to get into politics or the legal system at that level or under that level, because surviving the scrutiny and surviving these accusations would be very difficult for anyone to handle.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I mean, who would want to be in the position of Brett Kavanaugh at this point in time? But, the life of a Supreme Court justice has always been somewhat surreal. They're in some ways the most powerful people in the United States of America, and thus among the most powerful people in the world. But most of the time they have zero accountability. They're not in the public. They don't have to engage with the public, and yet they can tell vast swaths of Americans what to do and how they can live their lives. So, the good news for Brett Kavanaugh is that if he steels himself and gets through this process and gets on the Supreme Court, he's probably going to have a long and rich and productive career there. And, it won't any longer be profitable for liberals to attack him day in and day out and potentially fabricate allegations against him. So he needs to get through the next few weeks, and that's what Republicans need to do as well. And I still believe he's going to be confirmed. The bottom line, as I've said before, is that these allegations are not backed by substantial evidence.
I was talking to a friend of mine about the whole thing the other night, and he said you can see the extreme emotion in statements from both sides, and he said it's almost like the Civil War period where there's very little middle-of-the-road type of sentiment.
Yeah, right. I have heard that comparison, and people are asking the question: Are we at a tipping point where our system is going to break down, and violence will appeal to some people as a solution to this problem? And I can't guarantee that that's not the case. Tempers are running pretty high, but at the same time, I think probably most Democrats have always known where this process was going, that Republicans have the numbers in the Senate, that Kavanaugh is going to get on the Supreme Court. And probably what most Democrats want is to be able to say that they left nothing on the table, that they did everything in their power to block Kavanaugh. And your average core Democratic voter will find that reassuring to a point. So I think a lot of this has always been theater. It still is theater. And the basic machinery of our government will continue to function, at least for the foreseeable future.
Talking to Alfred State History Professor Dr. Nick Waddy. Dr. Waddy, if you could put on your European history hat for a moment, reading from Katie Hopkins' website. She's a conservative British journalist. Here's what she says, and this is on the topic of PC, political correctness. In the United Kingdom, words have become a policing priority. In London, where more than 100 children have been stabbed to death since the start of this year, our mayor has allocated £1.7 million on a specialist online hate squad to police words that are written online. She says the crisis in the UK is when you define anything other than approved thought as racist, xenophobic, or intolerant. And she goes on to say that just last week, a police force in the UK in South Yorkshire urged people to report insults that made them feel bad, even when it's not a crime. You're a history professor, European history professor there at Alfred State. Dr. Waddy, do you have any thoughts on this article?
Well, I think she has a point in that offensive speech and speech targeting certain groups is much more problematic in Europe than it is in the United States. We have better protections for free speech here than they do there. And all of it is very troubling, because when the state can begin to define, there's many ways to be hateful, but really what the state is doing is it's defining what species of hate is allowable and is not allowable, and that's a pretty frightening thing. So we're already seeing it in this country on college campuses, and there are plenty of stories in the media about ridiculous efforts to protect snowflakes from being offended, but it's gone beyond that, and it can go beyond that. There was a story recently about how Governor Cuomo wants to punish banks and financial institutions that do business with the NRA, and that's being challenged in the courts as a free speech issue, that basically the government is punishing people for their political views. And that may eventually end up in the Supreme Court, but there are plenty of people in the United States who would like to go down that same road that the Europeans are currently on, where certain types of speech are criminal, and we need to be on guard. We need to fight those tendencies.
What about this story? And I'm kind of wondering, as I ask you about it, would this happen in a place like London or Paris or Dublin? Senator Ted Cruz chased out of Washington, D.C. restaurant by anti-Kavanaugh protesters. Senator Cruz chased out of a D.C. restaurant by protesters. This happened Monday night. The videos were posted by a group called Smash Racism D.C. They show a large group of protesters chanting, "We believe survivors," and of course referring to the allegations against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. And they were shouting and hollering at Senator Ted Cruz and his wife Heidi. Cruz kept his cool, so did Cruz's wife Heidi. The senator said, "God bless you," and then eventually walked out because it got so obnoxious. Your thoughts, Dr. Waddy?
Well, I think it's profoundly unfortunate. It could be illegal. I don't know whether it's illegal. It could be some form of harassment, but it's profoundly unfortunate and disrespectful and rude. But my other thought, and I've said this before, is that this kind of behavior, which is so intolerant and childish, I just can't believe that liberals are winning many friends with these tactics, or winning over many middle-of-the-road voters, as you said. It makes them look ridiculous.
Sean Hannity made a point about this. He said someday one of these incidents is going to get really ugly and really out of hand, more so than it has so far. And, either someone's going to, and Hannity didn't say this, but this is my 2 cents, either the person who's being harassed is going to lose their cool, or somebody in the crowd gets out of hand and starts physically attacking, and maybe going too far in a physical attack against whoever it is that they're screaming and hollering is intolerant.
Right. Well, it can escalate. You're absolutely right. But I think what these protesters know is that they're always going to be shielded by the mainstream media. The mainstream media isn't going to jump all over them for protesting. In fact, it might see them as noble. But the best case scenario for these protesters is that they get their victims to overreact and perhaps even commit a crime, punch them in the face or something, and that's a win-win for the left. Then the media jumps all over Republicans as the problem, and as practitioners of violence. That's sort of what happened to the Republican running for Congress in Montana. A journalist was extremely disrespectful to him. He ended up punching the guy. And of course, the story is what a monster the Republican candidate for Congress was. So, these protesters know what they're doing to a certain extent, but they really need to be careful, because they could easily cross the line and be guilty of criminal conduct themselves.
Talking to Alfred State History Professor Dr. Nick Waddy. Does this kind of thing happen in Europe too, or I don't know, South America, any other continents?
That's a great question. I can't recall ever seeing stories of this. I mean, this is the sort of behavior that we all know was more common in the 60s and 70s, when there was sort of a protest culture and it was very in your face. But I can't certainly remember any recent stories in Europe of this sort of childish behavior. I may not be fully informed about it, but I think this may be a symptom of the peculiarly extreme reaction, the Trump derangement syndrome, if you will, that many liberals are experiencing, and they truly seem to believe that there is no such thing as going too far in hating Trump and hating Republicans, and I guess it's a free country. That if that's what they think, then so be it.
Hey, Dr. Waddy, I'm late on the break and the weather forecast. Let me do that really quick, and we'll be back with some more questions.
Great.
The Hornell Area Arts Council's Maple Leaf Art Festival, Sunday, September 30th at the Hornell Arts Center on Broadway. Visit and purchase items from talented local artists. Bid on a maple leaf in our silent auction. Listen to live music performances by Brian Friedland, Deanza McCool, and the Copper Hounds. Support your local artists and musicians. Come out and enjoy the Maple Leaf Art Festival, Sunday, September 30th from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Hornell Arts Center on Broadway. For more information, follow us at facebook.com/Hornell Area Arts or visit hornellarts.com.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carolyn. Rob, pretty chaotic morning. There's a power outage at Tobes Hill in Hornell. A house in Canisteo got hit by lightning in the 3 a.m. hour, and then we had that tornado warning from like 20 of 8 until 8 o'clock for Allegheny County.
Well, we've got unusually mild and humid air in place, Brian, and we've got a strong cold front headed our way, so we're getting some lift out ahead of that. And also, we've got some rotation. That's why we were able to get that tornado warning. The winds at the surface are out of the south, but as you go up, they twist. They become more backed around towards the northwest, and that's leading to that rotation of the air rising up through those storms. Good news is the front's going to be pushing through a little later on. The winds have already become west, just west of Buffalo. Once that sweeps in, our threat for showers and thunderstorms will diminish quite a bit, particularly severe weather, since temperatures will start to cool and the humidity will start to fall. But still a couple more hours where we'll have some showers and storms, Brian, some with some locally heavy downpours. We're breezy, about 70 to 75 for the high this morning. It's a little cooler this afternoon. Sun came up this morning at 7:03. It sets tonight right at 7 p.m. This is the last sunset at 7 o'clock. All the ones coming up for the next 6 months are going to be before then. But partly to mostly cloudy skies tonight. We're going to be cooler, 45 to 50. Clouds and some sunshine in the forecast for tomorrow. Temperatures up to about 65 to 70. We're Partly cloudy tomorrow night, 50 to 55. Friday looks partly sunny, nice 70. Saturday, not bad. Some sun, some clouds, maybe a shower in the 60s. And we'll see more of the same during the day on Sunday, Brian.
Thanks so much, Rob.
You got it, sir. Have a good one.
Back on Newsmaker with Alfred State History Professor Dr. Nick Waddy. And they're reporting, I think this was from the Drudge Report, that a federal judge appears to be ready to toss out a defamation lawsuit against President Donald Trump that was filed by Stephanie Clifford, who goes by the name Stormy Daniels. And she said that a man came up and threatened her. You better be careful. Imply that something violent was going to happen to her daughter in the back seat or something like that. Trump says it's a non-existent man and that Stormy Daniels is playing the fake news media. Did you have any thoughts on the latest there, which is the judge might dismiss the case?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the case concerns, but defamation wouldn't overlap with that sort of threatening conduct. I think she's suing because she believes that President Trump has said, she's a liar, basically, and she considers that defamation or libel. It wouldn't surprise me if the case was thrown out because proving defamation and or libel is extremely difficult in the United States, and that's probably a good thing. It protects free speech. But, it's inconsequential in the sense that the left is attacking President Trump on so many fronts that as soon as one lawsuit dies, 10 more will take its place. So don't worry, the Inquisition will continue.
Going to do something that I do with Dr. Gary Ostrower often when he's on. I should do it with, I should bring the site up too. I'm going to history.com/thisdayinhistory. It was this day in history back in 1981 that President Reagan's first Supreme Court nominee gets in there, Sandra Day O'Connor. Did you have any thoughts on Sandra Day O'Connor and her legacy, Dr. Waddy?
Well, she was, what's interesting about a lot of Republican picks for the Supreme Court over many years, over many decades, in fact, is that how many of them drifted to the left and actually ended up being either moderate judges, which I think you'd probably say was the case with Justice O'Connor, or actual leftists. Justice Souter, for example, who I'm pretty sure was chosen by the first President Bush, is now a confirmed liberal member of the court. So, the Supreme Court for most of the last several decades has been a pretty reliably liberal institution and has pushed the country to the left, even on issues where the country wasn't ready to go there yet. Gay marriage would be a good case in point. So, but what we've seen is an increasing politicization of the court. It's become more ideologically defined. Both parties have gotten really, really good at weeding out the justices who aren't going to vote the way that they want and expect them to vote. So, and just look at how much things have changed in terms of the way these nominees are treated in the media and by the opposition party. Sandra Day O'Connor would be rolling over in her grave if she had any sense that the confirmation process would have devolved to a circus like it is today. So things have changed a great deal since she went on the court. That's the one thing we can say for sure.
We've been talking with Alfred State History Professor Dr. Nick Waddy. Dr. Waddy, anything else that I didn't? Was there anything I didn't bring up?
Well, I'd just like to mention that there's a great article that I wrote recently about space policy. It's not something that gets a lot of attention in the media, but I wrote an article about it. People can find it on the blog, waddyisright.com, and I'd encourage everyone to check it out. WADDY is RIGHT.com. Dr. Waddy, as always, thanks for joining us. Thank you, Brian.